Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast, Easter Eve edition, Saturday, April 19th. This show, we're going to do predictions for the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, which begin tonight. And then we'll do some quick hitter stuff at the end. All right, we're going to go to the playoff bracket. We'll start in the East. And we'll start in the Atlantic Division. Your division winner, Toronto Maple Leafs, will be going up against the Ottawa Senators. Game 1 will be tomorrow at 7 p.m. on ESPN2. All right. Best player in the series is Austin Matthews. He is the face of the Toronto Maple Leafs franchise. He really, I think, has a big chip on his shoulder this season. 78 points this season, but only in 67 games. So he did miss a chunk of time, but he's healthy and ready to go for the postseason. Coaching advantage. I would give the edge to Craig Berube over Travis Green. And although Travis Green has had some good playoff success, but Craig Berube won a Stanley Cup with the Blues, so I'm going to give him the edge. Storyline of the series, Canadian rivalry. I like when those rivalries go head-to-head in the playoffs, especially if it was Ottawa-Montreal. Like, that would just be amazing if those two hooked up in the playoffs, but I've seen it before. I mean, that would have just been awesome. But there's going to be so much pressure on the Maple Leafs to win this series and to go far in the playoffs this year, considering that they have home ice until the conference finals. Assuming it's Washington that gets there. But we'll see. And will the Leafs respond to the pressure of playing against an inferior team and another, like I said, another Canadian rivalry? All right, prediction of the series. I'm going to say Maple Leafs in 6 games. I think Ottawa will pick them off twice. Ottawa does have guys that have playoff experience. They have Claude Giroux, who's been in a lot of big games. Brady Tkachuk's a great player. But they have some very talented players. Nick Cousins, Drake Batherson, Dylan Cousins. And they have a good defense, too. And in goaltending edge, if I'm Ottawa, you go with Linus Ullmark. You made the big move for him. So, yeah. And then Toronto will go Joseph Woll. So, I give the goalie edge to Ottawa in this series. Although I do think the Maple Leafs are going to win because they're just a better hockey team all around. And if you learn that, like with Montreal with Carey Price in the heyday, or the Rangers with Henrik Lundqvist in the heyday, the better goalie doesn't automatically give you the edge. It's kind of like a quarterback in football. In a way, when we saw it in the Super Bowl, having the better quarterback doesn't always give you the advantage like we saw with the Chiefs. So, Maple Leafs better team, Ottawa better goalie, Toronto better coach. I'm going to say Maple Leafs in 6. All right, the 2-3 in the East. Lightning Panthers, Lightning with home ice. Great series, good Florida series, good rivalry. Florida's owned the Lightning in the past. Oh, and we forgot to do odds for the Toronto-Ottawa series. I'm going to say Toronto's a big favorite. Probably like minus 1,200 or something like that. Let's see. Oh, it's only minus 200. That's weird. And then I have Maple Leafs in 6 games. That's plus 420. Favorite outcome is Leafs in 5 at plus 390. Then Leafs in 7 is 4-1. Leafs in 6 is plus 420. That's my pick. Next is Ottawa in 7, 6-1. Then Ottawa in 6 plus 650. Leafs sweeps plus 720. Ottawa 4-1 is 950. And Ottawa sweep is 20-1. All right. So, best player in the series for Florida and Tampa. You can make a case for a lot of guys here for best player in the series. But I think the best guy in the series is Nikita Kucherov, who is just a machine for sure. And yeah, this season, 121 points, led the league. So he's going to win the Art Ross trophy. So yeah, best guy in the series has to be him. The goaltending advantage I give it. This is a hard one because Sergei Bobrovsky just won the Cup last year. And Vasilevsky's been a Cup champion in the past too. 2-time Cup champion. But this is the best goalie matchup of the first round, in my opinion. I think Vasilevsky should get the goaltending advantage. Coaching advantage, John Cooper or Paul Maurice. That's a good one, too. This is a fabulous series. I mean, Tampa is better now than they were those last few years. I mean, getting Gensel in there. And Stamkos obviously not there anymore. And kind of showed his age. So, coaching advantage, I would give it to John Cooper. Because he's been to multiple Stanley Cup Finals and he's won multiple cups. No disrespect to Paul Maurice, who just won it last year. Storyline of the series. To me, it's the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like, will they finally break through? Is the question. So, last year, they played in the first round, and Florida won the series 4-1. Florida was up 3-0. Tampa won Game 4 at Amalie Arena, and then Florida came back home and won the series. In 2023, they did not play against each other. Florida won in 7. That was the year Florida won in 7 over Boston, when Boston was the President's Trophy winner. And Florida came back from 3-1. And then Toronto, that was when they broke through and won that playoff series. I remember they won 3 games in OT. And they blew out Tampa twice. Or no, I'm sorry, once. And then in 22, they did not play each other, or did they? Yes, they played each other in the second round in 22. and Tampa swept Florida. And now's the year Tampa won they lost in the final against Colorado. And then they beat the Rangers in the conference finals. And then, that was that year. So they've had some playoff history in the past, these two teams. And to me, is this going to be another run for the Tampa Bay Lightning? Or will Florida continue its postseason dominance again? But this is a hard decision, hard pick. In the standings, these two teams were 4 points apart. I think the Lightning are going to be only minus 120 would be my guess. Only because of the history and such. Florida's favored, minus 114. Tampa's minus 105. I'm picking Florida in 6, so it makes sense that Florida's favored. But the favored outcome in this series is Tampa Bay in 7 at plus 440. And then next, Florida in 6 at plus 450. That's where my pick is. Florida in 7 is plus 480. Tampa in 6 is plus 550. Florida in 5 is 6-1. So is Lightning in 5. Florida sweeps 11-1. Tampa sweeps 12-1. I'm picking Florida in 6. Although I do think that Tampa has a lot of edges in this series, but I think because of what have you done for me lately, Florida's just been a playoff machine of late, and they're in the Stanley Cup final the last 2 seasons, so there you go. All right, to the Metro Division. You have your 1 seed Washington Capitals and your 4 seed Montreal Canadiens. Washington, the 1 seed in the East. Dream season for them. Their series will begin on Monday. And by the way, Lightning Panthers starts Tuesday. Best player in the series, is there a more obvious one than Alex Ovechkin? Ovi obviously broke the record this year, the goals record. And now the question going into next year is that will he get his 900th goal, which I think he will, probably in the first game of the season. And who the hell knows who that will be against. We'll save that for the summertime to speculate. 897 goals. Maybe a hat trick on opening night would be pretty cool. So he's easily the best player in the series. Best coach. The coaching advantage has to go to Spencer Carberry. Spencer Carberry is a good coach. He should absolutely win the Jack Adams this year. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Martin St. Louis done an outstanding job with the Canadiens. I think he'll be in the mix for the Jack Adams Award, but nobody expected Washington to be the 1 seed in the East, so he deserves the Jack Adams Award. And like I said, St. Louis done a great job turning around the Canadiens. Storyline of the series. Outside of Alex Ovechkin, the Capitals don't have a lot of guys with experience. I think they're lucky that they got Montreal as the team they drew. If the Rangers didn't collapse down the stretch, that would have been a tough out for Washington. A tough out. The Rangers would have been one of the best second wildcard teams we've had. They're not better than the Florida team that beat Boston, but they would have been up there among one of the better wildcard teams. This Canadiens team isn't very good. So, I think Washington lucked out a little bit. And the goaltending edge in this series goes to Washington, as well with Charlie Lindgren over Jacob Dobbs. So, yeah, Washington has all the edges everywhere. And like I said, they got lucky with their matchup because shame on the Rangers, shame on the Islanders for underachieving this year. Or else they would have had a hard first round series. So that said, I am going to pick Washington to sweep Montreal. Because Montreal has zero experience in the playoffs, and I think the lack of experience will hurt Washington in a later round, but just not this round against a weak Canadiens team. Although it would have been really special to see Columbus in the playoffs this year. And they deserve a shout out for overachieving this year. And if they made it, I think that would have been a harder series for Washington because Columbus has talent. They do. And like I said, the Columbus Blue Jackets should be proud of the year they had, even though they didn't make the playoffs. Considering they went through so much before the season with the passing of Johnny Gaudreau and everything. So I'm just saying, it would have been absolutely awesome to see the Columbus Blue Jackets in the postseason, but it just didn't work out. Guess the odds for the series. I think Washington I'm going to say minus 700. Only minus 265. That's crazy. I'm not good at guessing the hockey odds. Montreal plus 215. I picked Washington sweep. That's 6-1. I just think Montreal sucks. The favorite outcome, though, is Washington at 5 and plus 330, which makes sense. Washington 6 is plus 380. Washington 7 is 4-1. Washington sweep is 6-1. Montreal and 7 is 7-1. Montreal and 6 is 8-1. Montreal and 5 is 12-1. Montreal sweep is 26-1. And now, last but not least, in the East, you have Hurricanes Devils. Their game 1 is tomorrow afternoon. Best player in the series. That's a hard one. It would have been Jack Hughes if he was healthy, but he is not healthy. So, for me, the best guy in the series is probably Sebastian Aho of the Hurricanes. Who did not have the best year this year from a point standpoint, but he's still really good. Coaching advantage in this series, to me, has to go to Rod Brindamore of the Hurricanes. Over Sheldon Keefe. Although Sheldon Keefe's a good coach. He's just had a lot of injuries to deal with this year, and it's just unfortunate. Goalie edge in this series. Frederick Anderson is a good veteran and has performed well in the playoffs in the past. So I'd give him the edge over Nico Dawes or Jake Allen or Jacob Markstrom. But who would they go with? Dawes? So it's going to be interesting to see who they'll go. They'll probably go with Markstrom because that's their guy that they acquired. So I'm going to say that's where they go with Markstrom. Storyline of the series. Could the Devils at least make this like a competitive series in spite of the injuries? I don't know. That is the question. Like I said, I think Keith's a good coach. I think Markstrom with his playoff experience does help. But they have so many injuries, the Devils. So it's going to be it's going to be interesting to see with how the Devils manage this. So, pick of the series. I'm going to say Canes in 5. I'm going to say the Canes are -2. I'm going to say -280. They might be a bigger favorite than Washington. Yeah, -295. Devils are +235. Favorite outcome of this series is Carolina in 5 at +310. Carolina in 6 is +380. Carolina sweep is +5. Or Carolina in 7 is 4-1. Carolina sweep is +550. Devils in 7 is 7-1. Devils in 6 is +850. Devils in 5 is 13-1. And Devils sweep is 29-1. All right, now we'll move on to the West. We have 2 series starting tonight. We'll start with the President's Trophy winning Winnipeg Jets against the St. Louis Blues, who have been a very pleasant surprise this year. So, best player in this series is probably Kyle Connor. An almost 100-point season for him. You can make a case for Mark Sheffley too, because he's really good. But because of the year he's had, we got to say Kyle Connor. Coaching advantage. I would say Scott Arniel over Jim Montgomery. Although Montgomery has playoff experience, and then Arniel has just been outstanding as a coach. This year, and he got fired in the middle of the season in 11-12. So, he's a much better coach now than he was back then. like from an experience standpoint, the answer is Jim Montgomery, but this year it's definitely Scott Arniel. Storyline of the series. There's a lot of pressure on the Jets. You're the President's Trophy winners. It's kind of like the East a little bit, like St. Louis is not that strong WC2. Like, they're better than Montreal for sure, in my opinion. They're a better team than Montreal this year, but they're not as good as, say, some of the WC2s in the West that we've had in the past. And I think Calgary could have given them a series, but not meant to be. So to me, it's like this Winnipeg, how Winnipeg responds to the pressure. It's kind of like Washington in the East in a way. So picking the series, I'm going to say Jets in 5. I think St. Louis wins 1 game at home. Jordan Binghamton's had playoff experience in the past. And best goalie in the series has to be Connor Hellebuyck. Has to be. Over Binghamton. So, I'm going to say Winnipeg in 5, and I think Winnipeg's probably like a minus, maybe like minus 280. Let's see. Minus 225, St. Louis is plus 184. Winnipeg in 5 is plus 370. That's my pick in the series. That's the favorite outcome. And then Winnipeg in 6 is plus 380. Winnipeg in 7 is plus 410. St. Louis in 6 and 7 are each plus 650. Winnipeg sweeps 7-1. St. Louis in 5 is 11-1, and St. Louis sweep is 23-1. All right, next series, Stars Avalanche. That's a really good series in the West, the 2-3. They've had history in the past. Best guy in the series. It has to be Nathan MacKinnon. With the year he's had and his playoff success in the past, I mean, come on. Reigning Hart Trophy winner. So, he's got to be the best guy in the series. Goalie advantage. I would give it to Jake Ottinger. Over Colorado's goalie, whether that's Mackenzie Blackwood or Scott Wedgwood, who would start for them in the playoffs is would be very interesting. I mean, Mackenzie Blackwood's had a decent year this year, so that's kind of like a platoon situation in Colorado. Wedgwood's been better. But yeah, Ottinger gets a big edge in goal, in my mind. And then the storyline of the series. So both of these teams have made deep runs in the past. Colorado won the Cup not long ago. Dallas has made the conference finals a couple times. They lost to Edmonton last year. The year before, they lost to Vegas, and then Vegas ended up winning the Cup. In 22, they were a wild card. They lost in Game 7 to Calgary. That was when Jake Ottinger made a name for himself in that Game 7. And then in 21, they were not in the postseason. And that was a COVID bracket. And then in 2020, in the COVID bubble, they were in the finals. So they've been the conference finals, but they've never broken through to the Stanley Cup final within the last couple of years, other than COVID. And then, like I said, the Avs won in 22. And they lost to Vegas in 21 in the COVID playoffs. So, we'll see. I'm going to pick the Dallas Stars in 6 games. Do I feel good about that pick? No. Because the best player is on the Avalanche in the series. But Dallas, with their experience and with Ottinger in big games, I trust. So, I'm going to say Dallas in 6 games. And plus, Colorado, low-key, not as good as they used to be without Mikko Rantanen, who is now on the Stars, believe it or not. So that is a really fun subplot of this series, the Mikko Rantanen revenge. I didn't even bring that up earlier. So, yeah. Stars in 6, and I think the Stars are probably, I'm saying the Avalanche are probably like a minus 115 favorite or something like that. Whoa, Colorado's minus 176. Why are they that big of a favorite? Someone heard on Dallas that I'm unaware of? And the Stars are plus 146. I'm picking Dallas in 6. That's 7-1. Favorite outcome in this series is Avalanche in 6 at plus 380. Then Avs in 5 or 7 at plus 450. 5-1's Dallas in 7. Dallas in 6 is 7-1. Colorado's sweep and Dallas in 5 for each 8-1, and then a Dallas sweep is 19-1. Yeah, but I don't understand why the line is what it is. And Dallas, I think, is going to pull off the upset. All right, the Pacific Division side of the bracket. 1 seed, Vegas Golden Knights. 4 seed, Minnesota Wild. And by the way, Stars Avalanche begins tonight as well. Golden Knights Wild, it starts tomorrow. So Vegas has just been a steady force since they've joined the league. Best player in the series, you could go a number of directions here. But to me, it's Jack Eichel. Jack Eichel's finally becoming the player he was hyped up to be in the number 2 pick in the draft that year with Connor McDavid. But he just needed to be on a good team. And now he has his own team. And he's had the best year of his life. And to me, he's the best guy in this series. Although Minnesota does have a lot of talent too on their roster. Coaching advantage has to go to Bruce Cassidy over John Hines. John Hines has had a nice coaching career. He's been a good coach at other places. I mean, if this was a different series, maybe I'd give him the edge, but Bruce Cassidy's a better coach right now than John Hines. Bruce Cassidy won a Stanley Cup 2 years ago. John Hines doesn't have a Stanley Cup on his resume. Goalie advantage. it has to go to Aiden Hill if he's the starter in Vegas. Because he was the guy in the Cup run. So I would assume it is going to be him going for Vegas. And the funny thing is Marc-Andre Fleury might be starting for Minnesota, which is really interesting because he was obviously on that first Vegas team that made the Stanley Cup final. And Minnesota is probably going to go with Philip Gustafsson, though, because that's probably the better move on paper. Storyline, the series, I want to see how this Minnesota team, with a lot of youth on it, responds. Last year, they were not in the postseason. The year before, they lost in 6 to Dallas. So they've been in the playoffs within the past couple of years. And they got swept by Colorado the year Colorado won the Cup. They were a wild card. The COVID playoffs, they lost in 7 to Vegas. So they've had some history of Vegas, although Vegas had a different team then, so did Minnesota. So, I want to see how Minnesota responds. They have a lot of youth on their team. And they're going up against a team that's had some championship experience in the past. So the pick of the series, I'm going Vegas in 5. And then my guess for the line, I'm going to say is Vegas. Vegas minus 250. Minus 235. That's the closest one I got so far. And Minnesota's plus 190. And Vegas in 5 is the favorite outcome and plus 350. Then Vegas in 6 or 7 is 4-1. And then Minnesota in 7 and Vegas sweep is each plus 650. Minnesota in 6 is 7-1. Minnesota in 5 is 11-1. Minnesota sweep is 23-1. And last but not least, Kings Oilers. Best player of the series, come on. It's none other than Connor McDavid, the best, arguably, athlete in all of sports. I mean, you could really make that case about that with McDavid now that Mahomes lost the Super Bowl and then he came back from 3-0 to force a Game 7 last year. So he's easily the best guy in the series. Coaching advantage, I would give it to the Oilers coach, who I want to talk about, obviously, because I'm such a big fan of his. Chris Knobloch, who I really was hoping would be the Rangers coach. And see where that went. Even though they did win the Prez Trophy last year. But Chris Knobloch's done a great job with Edmonton. And he took them to the finals last year. So to me, he has a very significant coaching advantage there over Jim Hiller of the Kings, who's done a good job. No, don't get me wrong. But Jim Hiller has like 0 playoff experience. Goalie advantage. Edmonton's bugaboo has always been their goaltending. But Stuart Skinner really stepped up. For Edmonton in the past, and so I have to pick him over Darcy Kemper. Because Darcy Kemper really hasn't been the same since he left the Avalanche. I mean, he's had a great year this year. So this has been his best year in a different situation. But, like, there was a while where he wasn't the same guy, but now he's kind of reverted back to that guy that he was with Colorado. But because of last year's run, I would give the edge to Skinner over Darcy Kemper. Storyline, the series. Can the Kings actually break through? This is one of the... I know Dallas is a pretty significant underdog against Colorado, but this is going to be another underdog as a 2 seed. And they'll be a bigger underdog because of how Vegas feels about Edmonton. But can the Kings overcome being a big underdog, at least making this an interesting series? I'm not so sure. I'm going to say Edmonton in 5 as the pick. And I think the favorite outcome is going to be Edmonton in 6. And they're only minus 132. Again, that's a surprise that they're only minus 132 against the Kings. Like, why is Colorado a bigger favorite than Edmonton? Makes sense to that. The favorite outcome here is Edmonton at 6 at plus 410, then Edmonton at 7 at plus 470. My pick's Edmonton at 5. That's... Oh, Kings in 7 is the second favorite outcome. And then it's Edmonton in 7. Kings in 7 is plus 450. Edmonton in 5 is plus 550. Kings in 6 is 6-1. Kings in 5 is plus 650. Edmonton sweeps 10-1. Kings sweep is 14-1. So there you have it with the picks. For the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll see how I do. I think that Dallas being that big of an underdog is crazy. And Edmonton being that short of a favorite over the LA Kings is crazy too. Washington's not as big as a favorite as I thought. The biggest favorite in round 1 is Carolina over the Devils. But that's because of the Devils' injury situation. That's unfortunate. So, a couple quick hitters before we go. I want to talk about the Rangers a little bit. They're going to clean house. I think they're going to fire Peter Laviolette and Chris Drury. I'm surprised they haven't done it yet. But I just think that they're waiting for, like, the Knicks to lose to the Pistons. If that happens, like, a game. I think they're waiting for, like, a bad Knicks thing to happen so they could take the potential negative attention away from them. Or are they going to do it on Monday, on Easter Monday? Maybe because there's a holiday weekend. Maybe they'll do it on Easter Monday, right before the draft, before all the Jets and the Giants take the attention. But James Dolan is the king of I'm going to pick my poison and when to take the attention away. You've seen that with how he runs the two teams there. So I do think he's going to fire both guys. And that team is either going to have a major rebuild or they're just going to make changes similar to Vegas in 2022 after they missed the playoffs and they made some roster changes and then they go out and win the Cup. So it could be like a 2022-23 Vegas situation next year for the Rangers if things go well. And I think they botched it with Chris Knobloch. They should have hired him instead of Peter Laviolette. And the reason why they didn't hire Chris was because they thought they were close to a title. So they want to hire somebody that won a cup in the past and did it that way. But I also think the Rangers are kind of waiting to see like who gets fired from the playoff teams, which is interesting. Which, they're definitely watching that because playoff teams fire their coaches a lot in hockey. If things go really bad, like I'm very interested to see like what if Colorado loses to Dallas. I mean, that's a coaching advantage I didn't pick. Jared Bednar or Pete DeBoer. I think Jared Bednar is a better coach than Pete DeBoer. But like I said, I picked Dallas to win the series. So say if Dallas beats Colorado, Jared Bednar, I mean, could he be fired? And that could be a Rangers option. I would love it if they hired Jared Bednar from Colorado. I mean, if Tampa loses to Florida, could John Cooper be an option? That would be interesting. So I think the Rangers are also waiting to see what happens with some of these playoff teams and who fires their coaches before they make a move. And I think that's wise. Especially if Bednar or Cooper's on the table. I would go after one of those guys. And then the Devils, like last year, they went out and got Sheldon Keefe, who was better than Lindy Ruff, obviously. But they're probably going to lose to Carolina in round one. But that, like I said, that's more injury based. I mean, if they were healthy, maybe I would have picked them over Carolina. And then back to the Rangers for a second. I said they're probably going to make some player changes. Everyone's talking about Chris Kreider and Mika Zibanejad. And Chris Kreider, great Ranger. He really is a polarizing player. He did miss time this season. I'm trying to find the website that says all the contract information and whatnot. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him and Mika Zibanejad. Those are the two that stand out. And maybe they do what Vegas does. Like, I will trade these guys for another disgruntled player. Like what Vegas did with Jack Eichel, and look how that's worked out. And they did kind of try to do that with JT Miller, but that was too late. But those are two guys I'm interested to see what happens with on the Rangers. I think Igor Shesterkin's probably back. They did extend him for a reason. So that's that. And then Sam Rosen retired. And I feel bad because the team had arguably the most disappointing season in the history of the franchise the year Sam Rosen retires. And Sam, I'm surprised he lasted as long as he did. I thought he would have retired COVID with Doc Emmerich. And he waited it out for another 5 years. And then it was announced that Kenny Albert will be replacing him on TV with Joe Micheletti, which is absolutely the right move. It was the move that they had to do. And now the Knicks and the Rangers have the voices of their respective leagues calling their games, which I think is amazing. I just had to point that out. I think that's the best part of it. But Kenny's a great person. I know that this means a lot to him because his dad was the voice of the Knicks and was the radio voice of the Rangers before Kenny took that job. So, I mean, there's only one choice to replace Sam Rosen, and that was Kenny Albert. And I was screaming for that for a while, saying that had to be the replacement. And Alex Faust is going to be the backup for when Albert does national TV. But now the question is, I think, now flip it to basketball. Is Kenny Albert still going to be the Knicks backup guy? That would be actually pretty funny if he did that too. Because he would fill in for Mike Breen when Mike Breen would be on TV. So, like, the hockey and basketball broadcasting schedules go through the Garden. And I think that Mike probably has more of a say than Kenny, only because Mike's more established as the voice of the NBA. I mean, Doc, I think, did have a lot of say when he was doing the Devils and national TV. But I do think that Mike has a little bit of a say in what he wants to do, and that's why he gets a lot of Knicks games on national TV. And the same thing's going to happen with the Rangers. And it was the case with the Rangers before Kenny officially got the TV gig. So, a fun little broadcasting subplot there with Kenny Albert being named the voice of the Rangers, which I'm very fired up about. Coaches on the hot seat. Really quick, I want to discuss in the hockey playoffs. So, I think the loser of Stars Avalanche, that coach could be fired. I think that another coach in trouble could be John Cooper if they lose to Florida, because the Lightning haven't gone on a deep run in a couple years, and there's been rumors about friction and such. Ron Brind'Amour, there's a lot of thought that he was going to leave the Hurricanes, but if they choke that Devils series, I mean, could he be in trouble? If they're not in the conference finals, I think there's a chance he's out. Brind'Amour. Yeah, so I think Rod Brind'Amour, John Cooper, and then the loser of Stars Avalanche, whether that's Pete DeBoer or Jared Bendar. I think those are the coaches in trouble that are in the postseason. And we didn't do this in the NBA. I mean, maybe we did talk about it a little bit. Jamal Mosley, I brought up as, if they get swept by the Celtics, I think he's out, which I think is going to happen. Tom Thibodeau, if they lose to Detroit, or if they get swept by Boston in the second round, if they get by Detroit and they're not competitive against the Celtics, I think he's out. I think he saves his job if they make the conference finals, I think he's back. If they upset the Celtics, or if they lose in 7 against Boston, maybe they're competitive series at Boston, they lose in 7, and something weird happens, and maybe a bad call or something happens and then they lose to Boston, then I think he's back. I think Eric Spoelstra's safe. I correctly predicted the Heat and the Grizzlies getting through the play-in tournaments. And then, obviously, Golden State and Orlando being the 7 seeds. And then, who else am I thinking of in the East? Is Quinn Snyder safe in Atlanta? Because of them losing to Orlando and Miami. I mean, are we sure he's safe, Quinn Snyder? The Hawks are a dysfunctional organization, and they have one of the more dysfunctional kind of players in Trae Young. So Quinn Snyder being fired would not stun me, just for that reason alone. Somehow Nick Nurse saved his job in Philadelphia. Someone explained that to me. Because they had one of the most, they arguably had their most disappointing season in franchise history. We were talking about the New York Rangers earlier. Like, how the fuck did the Sixers decide to keep their coach and their GM? Like, what the heck, Daryl Morey? And then Doc Rivers is another one. It looks like that Dame's coming back for either Game 2 or Game 3, and if they still lose to Indiana, and that's not competitive, I think he could be out. I think Rick Carlisle's safe because they made the conference finals last year. On the flip side, the West, we saw Mike Malone get fired. How does Rick Adelman keep his job? Or get the interim tag removed? They beat the Clippers, and then they're competitive with OKC. That's how he gets the tag removed. And then, how does the Grizzlies intern coach, Tomas Asalo, get the tag removed? If they somehow found a way to upset OKC, which isn't happening. But yeah, they're going to have a new coach next year, Memphis. And then on the flip side, who's on the hot seat? I think Chris Finch is safe because they made the Western Finals last year. And I gave him the coaching edge over J.J. Redick in that series. Although I did pick Lakers in 6. Obviously, J.J.'s not in trouble. If the Clippers lose to Denver, I think Ty Lue's potentially in trouble. And then OKC's coach, Mark Dagnall, is safe for sure. I'd be shocked if he was let go. Obviously, Jason Kidd, Nico Harrison, we're on watch for them. Who's going to replace Doug Christie? Doug Christie's not coming back. I think him not getting through the play-in tournament cost him. He's done. I think Ime Udoka's obviously safe. But if Golden State loses to the Rockets and they fall apart, I mean, are you sure Steve Kerr's a lock to come back? Like, what if they, have a 2011 Lakers kind of collapse against the Rockets? I mean, you can't rule it out. I think that's a coach that could be in trouble if they have a bad series against the Rockets. And to me, the hot coaching candidate in the NBA is Jeff Van Gundy. And I also think there's a Knicks reunion possibility if the Knicks lose to the Pistons or if they're not competitive against the Celtics in round 2. They get rid of Tibbs. And then they hired a guy that Tibbs worked under in New York originally in the late 90s, early 2000s. And someone that's beloved by Knicks fans. I think he's one of the more beloved figures in Knicks history. So I think a Jeff Van Gundy Knicks reunion's on the table. And that would be amazing. I'm kind of rooting for that. And I think Jeff's done a great job with Ty Lue this year with the Clippers. And he did a good job with Joe Mazzulla last year at the Celtics, so he has a ring. So I'm interested to see where Jeff Van Gundy goes. I think that, he's going to be a coach next year, and I think my beloved Knicks is a possibility. I think Memphis is a possibility for him. Denver, you think he'd love to coach Jokic. I think the Bucks are possible, and that's a funny one if he ended up with the Bucks because Doc's and like that Jeff, he has connections with Jeff as well. So Jeff Van Gundy watch, I think, is a big subplot this spring in the NBA, and I wanted to talk about that. All right, so, it just came down. Peter Laviolette out as Rangers coach as we're recording the podcast. How funny is that? That news comes out as I'm recording the podcast. So, right move, obviously. Now the question is Chris Drury out the door too? We'll do another show about this, I guess, on Monday. We've had enough talking. Happy Easter, everybody.